Kia ora, welcome back once again. We're here for, I think this is part 2 or 3, part 3, I think, of the reaction to Mark Donaldson VC and his podcast interview. So let's jump on back in. Play.
And then bullets were flying in. There was another American there that had been shot as well that was fighting beside him.
Sorry, just for those that might just be jumping in or may have missed the other ones. So we're kicking back off from roughly where he was in the other video that I did, reaction of his interview in here. And he's into sharing the experience or telling the story about the actions that led to him being awarded the Victoria Cross.
And he eventually got himself back up. Couldn't quite get himself onto the back of the vehicle because his hip was starting to seize up from where the bullet had gone through. Because it's gone through one side and lodged in the socket of the other side. And so he eventually made his way to the front of the vehicle while it was still moving and got to climbed onto the bull bar. And again, I take my hat off to him because he sort of got himself onto the bull bar and thought, well, at least I can fight from here. He sort of buried his head in the toe chain that was on the front because he thought, well, I've been hit through the body, I can take a few more. But if I get hit in the head, I'm cooked, kind of thing. And I remember that point sort of near there where a lot of the rockets were coming in and it was really obvious that they had it dialed in. And so I said to the guy I was fighting next to, the 2IC, look, I'm going to run through there, try and draw some fire. I remember it was a very distinctive, as silly as it sounds, a very distinctive decision. So I did that, took off. He came with me. I remember them firing at us. I remember bullets coming in. Slid in behind a decent sized rock. It was probably not just quite big enough for the two of us. So you can imagine, I slid into the rock and then he came sliding in next to me and sort of knocked me out one side of it, and the bullets were striking like in the back of the rock. And so I was trying to shuffle him back behind it and was pushing him out the other side, kind of thing. So we've got jostling behind this rock.
All right, man. It's I shouldn't be laughing, but I can't help but laugh. Like, now I'm glad, because both him and his mate are safe and that's done. But just the way he's sharing the story as well is really engaging, but also has the typical Aussie humour about it, which I really like.
And bullets were striking around it and rockets and things coming over. But I remember looking back and just seeing those cars go through that spot, and it was just enough to put the enemy off not shooting rockets and bursts of machine gun fire at those cars where the wounded guys were. They went through. We kind of realised then, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But, and the cars were just going. So, we started to run back and try to catch back up with the cars. We're kind of getting towards the end of the valley here and it was getting more choked as far as the terrain was going.
Sorry, got to cut in again. I need to share it. Just what a selfless act that was from Mark's conscious decision. I'm going to run through there to draw fire away, to give the vehicles with the wounded people enough time, or hopefully an opportunity, because he didn't know if it was going to work, but to give them an opportunity, hopefully, to get through and get out of that area by drawing the enemy's fire. And then the 2IC for following along with him as well. And it just shows the level within the unit. You don't need to hold any rank to be a leader, to take the charge, to make a decision, and to know that the people in your team, if they're able-bodied and capable of moving and fighting still, that they're going to follow you, whether you're a trooper, whether you're an officer, whether you're a sergeant, whether you're a corporal, trooper equivalent to a private. Like, they're gonna have your back if they can, if they're able to. And clearly this 2IC was able to. Hard case listening to him say, no, maybe that wasn't such a good idea because all the vehicles are going through now. But now they're hoofing it. They're on their legs and now starting to try to catch up to the vehicles. But just incredible selfless act, that in and of itself, to try to draw the enemy's fire to give the rest of the team a chance to try to make it through there.
Channeling us back into the road. Yeah, I remember seeing the car in front get hit by rockets, and 2 guys got blown out of the back as I saw it. One was an Australian guy who had he was an engineer, had an EOD guy, and he had a search dog with him, or an explosive dog. That dog unfortunately took off into the valley.
Yeah.
Ran away from the explosions, as you'd imagine. And the other guy was the Afghan interpreter, laying face down. The car continued to drive off. Where we were was kind of offset from that position. And I just remember seeing him lying out there, mate, getting shot at, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And said to my team, 2IC at the time, at the back of the vehicle, I'm I'm going to go out there and get him. He kind of didn't agree with me on my idea. But by the time I'd sort of, processed that, I was sort of moving anyway. By that stage, I'd already taken off. So,
wow, awesome! Just sums it up like that. Awesome. The decision, the just following through, seeing a colleague of theirs out in the open, taking rounds, and just making the decision, I'm going to go out there and get him. I never knew this about the 2IC not being too keen on that idea, but I understand. I have I guess, my own interpretation. I have my own understanding of where the 2IC was probably coming from. It's probably taken in a whole bunch of the battle damage assessment, which is still ongoing right now because they don't really have a lull at the moment from what I'm hearing to be able to take it all in fully. But he's weighing up all of that stuff that's been happening, the injuries, the casualties, the people getting hit, the rockets coming in, just the bad spot that they're in. And being reluctant is where I was going. He's likely reluctant to want to have one of the members of his team go out there and risk his life again in the open, because they've gotten away with it once or twice now so far, drawing the enemy's fire, and probably doesn't want to risk it too many more times or at all if he can avoid it, if he can have some sort of sway over it. But as Mark said, like as soon as he's uttered the words, he's already in motion from what I'm picking up on, and he's moving towards going to pick that person up, which is just, it's just awesome.
Just remember seeing him lying there, mate, getting shot at, thinking, what a horrible place to be. Got out to him, the Afghan guy, started to drag him through the dirt. Wasn't really working out for me. Pretty tired by that stage too, and just sort of got him to his feet, mate. He was kind of unconscious when I got to him, pretty much. By the time I got him up, he was starting to become conscious. He was trying to grab at his face. He had some reasonable wounds on his face. I remember a lot of blood on there, and just started to kind of half carry, half drag him.
Yep.
Just telling him to keep going, keep moving. And just remember looking at the vehicle and watching it starting to drive off on us, and just thought, well, that was a good idea. Now what?
That's hard work at the best of times, just in training, dealing with a conscious casualty when you've got a man down drill or anything like that. And then, either scooping them up, either by yourself, getting them on your shoulders, fireman's carrying them on your own with a scenario-based casualty who's not dead weight, versus having somebody who's sort of in the thick of it, semi-conscious, like he was saying, he's half carrying, half dragging him, this individual, their interpreter, to try to get him to safety. Meanwhile, there's enemy fire still coming down on your position, on his and the injured Afghan interpreter's position. And that's hard work. Like I said, he's a little tired by now. Well, no crap. You've been running around, drawing enemy fire, letting off rockets, running backwards and forwards, running away again to try, not running away, but running out in the open to try to draw enemy fire to give the vehicles a chance with the wounded to get away, then running back to try to catch up to the vehicles. Now you're running out again in the open, exposing yourself to pick up your injured Afghan interpreter as part of your team, and now trying to half carry, half drag, while moving as quickly as you can to get back to the vehicles. Yeah, to say you're a little tired by the stage, probably an understatement, but incredible, Mark.
And it was a conscious decision to go and do it. But yeah, just thought the best place I can get him is back to that car, and just gave it a real nudge, mate, and got him back there eventually. Trying to wrap a bandage around his head at the same time as putting him into the back of the car through the doors, like the back doors, whilst it's moving, right? And this part I remember really distinctly because I was just tired. I remember being really tired, leaning against the car just to keep myself upright whilst I'm pushing him along and sort of half carrying him, and eventually got the doors open after giving it a couple of goes on both sides. By then, the cars were really starting to take off because they got back onto the road and had a bit of momentum. As I come around to the rear of the car to try and get on the back, I saw my mate who was there. It was his third time outside the wire. Yeah. Somewhere in between that point, he'd been shot, like between that period. He had blood coming down his face. I was like, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Oh, I've been shot." And, I sort of said, "Yeah, no shit." Shot through his head, mate. And no helmet. We didn't have helmets on. So you imagine like through and through on his hat, helmet. We didn't have helmets. Yeah, shot through his head, mate. And no helmet. We didn't have helmets on. So
sorry, I just rewound that again just to make sure. Now I did hear, and I didn't realise they didn't have helmets on. Shot in the head. Crazy. Now, far out. Honestly,
you imagine like through and through on his hat, clipped his skull. Super lucky. Probably one of the luckiest guys I've seen.
I think was that the photo in the book?
The graze on the head.
Man, it's more than a graze, Brad. I can tell you. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So he was still fighting, right? And that's
his mates after probably saying to him, probably a good thing you got a bloody hard head. They're just thinking of the banter and the jokes that they probably would have come out with the guy that's been shot in the head, man. It's crazy. And still in the fight. Still fighting.
So, I looked at that and we just went, like, how awesome and inspirational is that that's the kind of level of soldier you get in the Australian Army. Yeah, we eventually got on the back of the car. There was a wounded Afghan who'd been shot through the face, wounded Aussie, been shot through the hand and the leg, wounded American, been shot through the arm, a dead American who'd been unfortunately gunshot wound through the head, and there's an Aussie up on the 50 cal on the turret, and who'd been fighting from pretty much there the whole way through, like,
wow,
pretty solid. And they had a GPMG on the back, like the American version of the Mag 58, 240 Bravo, I think it used to be. I jumped on that and I started, hooking in with that where I could see the enemy was. And I remember that felt awesome as well. After fighting with your M4 for that whole period of time. And I remember, I just remember thinking,
jumping on the Mag 58 or the GPMG, the 7.62, that would have felt a lot more meatier than the little with the 5.56 from your M4 firing towards the enemy. So, hard case hearing him say that felt awesome as well.
Oh, thank goodness I got something. It's got a bit more oomph to it. And then it stopped. So I went through the drill that you go through, and it didn't fire again. I was like, okay, you go through the drill again when it fails to fire a second time. Put my hand up to change the gas setting, and the gas plug had been shot.
Oh,
like through that period, right? Like just in between that burst and the second burst kind of thing, or third burst. So I was kind of like, far out. Like, what else is going to go wrong here? So we just laid down on top of the guys. We're kind of above the armor of the back of the vehicles, and we just decided to fight from that point. And I remember my mate was lying face down, like laying down, shooting. Imagine his gun was kind of underneath him almost.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was laying on my back trying to shoot across him, across the back of him, because most of the fire by that stage was only coming from one direction at that point as we were moving along. And I remember him starting to yell out like, my back, right? He's like, oh, my back. I think I've been shot. And I remember looking down and his shirt had ridden up because he was laying face down. And as I was shooting across the back of him, like on his lower back, where my suppressor was, because I'd put so many rounds through the gun, it had got so damn hot that it was just cooking his skin. It was just cooking his back. And those suppressors we had at the time, they're quite like a distinctive pattern. They're quite like dimpled, or almost like a golf ball dimple.
Branded it.
Yeah, and I remember looking down and I was like, no, you haven't been shot, mate. You're all right. Don't worry about it. He's like, what is it? I said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later.
Crack up. Yeah, I thought it was going to be brass, like hot brass building up on his back, but no, you said it was the suppressor from his weapon. And yeah, I know the suppressor that he's talking about. Yeah, it sounds like he's ended up branding him on his back through the heat that's built up through the amount of rounds he's putting through his weapon. Oh man, it's really cool to see that Mark can laugh about these things now. You know what? For me personally, it would be great to see him with the guys that were there. You know, obviously the guy there that thought he's been shot. You know, to hear him talk about it as well, and just it would be cool to see them in the banter that would go on between them. But just the fact that they're lying down on top of those that are injured, so they're covering those that are injured. And unfortunately, he mentioned there's an American that's been killed, shot through the head. You got his Aussie mate, third day in country, shot in the head, still fighting. Mark as well there, just, you know, doing everything that they can to protect those that are in their team, whether they're Afghan, whether they're American, whether they're Australian, whether they're special forces, whether they're engineers, whether they're dog handlers. The list goes on. Like, they're just good men doing the best they can making the best they can of a terrible situation that they found themselves in.
But you could see the dimples on his back where it had burnt. But we laugh about it now. But yeah, we eventually got back to the base, mate. I think it was roughly sort of 3 to 4 kilometres long from first shots to last shots.
Wow.
That we fought across, and about 3.5 hours. I would say 3 to 3.5 hours.
No,
so of consistent, and that's consistent gunfire. And then they were talking about overrunning the base on the radios, and you imagine it's kind of turns into this, as ridiculous as it sounds, but it's like a bit of a MASH scene for those who are old enough to remember that show.
I can remember that show.
In a way. All the guys are laid out, the guys with their different various wounds, and we had to try and re-ammo the cars up as best we could with the ammo that was at the base. They had these little ramps that you put the cars up on.
You know what? Sorry, aside from all the guns, they've got lots of guns on the wall, but I just love these two guys and how engaged they are. I mean, it's hard to not be engaged when Mark is speaking, and especially if you're a podcast host like these two gentlemen are, and you invite somebody on, you want to be looking engaged, and they clearly are. But I love, much like Sean Ryan, and I suppose the Joe Rogans of the world and other, really great podcasters, just how they let their guest tell the story and just share the experience with them, but also for all of us. It's awesome. It's cool to see.
2 nurses that were there with the Americans, and some of the extra staff were there trying to help out. So, we eventually then were able to get the helicopters in. I'm shortening this part a little bit, but we were able to get the helicopters in and start to get some of the wounded evac'd. Last guy I remember putting on was the Afghan I went and picked up. They'd eventually able to stabilise him, went back into the little med station, and there was my mate with his little crease through his head. Now we stapled him up, and we basically then kind of stood to, if you will, because we still had the Aussies that were out there on foot, right? Because the whole idea was we were going to manoeuvre up in the vehicles and pick them up so they didn't have to walk as far back. And so we waited up until about 3 a.m. in the morning to when they actually finally got back. We finally got some air support overhead to give us some protection at the base. We copped a fair flogging. I think it was 9 guys were wounded out of the 13 Australians. Out of the 4 who weren't necessarily wounded, a few of us had holes through our gear where the bullets had come through pants, sleeves, just hitting the body armor and stuff. So one guy's antenna had been shot off. So imagine they have like a little personal antenna, like a bullet had clipped through the antenna, like lots of close calls like that. But I remember, 3 a.m. and the guys came back and sort of, again, the funny things, right? And they came in and they were pretty, like, it was a decent sized hill. They were pretty busted from the walk they'd just done because they were carrying a bit of stuff as well. Yeah. And one of the guys, my mates, he sat down and I said, "Oh, how are you?" And he goes, "Mate, that was a hell of a walk." Right? I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, mate, that was shocking."
Did you sort of say, "Let me tell you about my day"?
No, I just had a bit of a giggle, I was like, that's just how it is. The next night, we did go out on another mission, looking for the dog, and we were coming back into the base, and
I didn't know any of this stuff now of what he's talking about. I love that they went out again the next night, by the sounds of things, to look for the dog, that ran away when the bullets and the bombs and that were going. Now, I don't know if they find the dog, but just that act alone, that act of these men going out to look for this dog is pretty special. Some people may not agree with that. There may be those that, animal rights and all that sort of thing, that think they shouldn't be involved or there in the first place, and each to their own. But I love the fact, and it's special to me, that these men would go out to look for this dog. Now I want to see if they find it.
The Afghan guys at the US are trained up, right? They're always doing the security, and so we had one of our guys up there telling them, "Look, there's some Aussies coming back in. It's dark, like they don't have the best equipment. Don't shoot. Right? Don't shoot." And so we're trying to come back into the base, and we're probably about 100 meters out. The next minute, and they've opened up on us. There's the good guys, and I remember again, I was hiding behind this rock, just giggling, and
we'll get to the giggles soon, but this is the danger of the blue on blue. Friendly fire coming in and taking out your guys coming in. So they've tried to do everything that they can. They've radioed in, they've given the information, but still, like I said, rounds coming in, and then he's sitting, taking cover. Thankfully, he's got cover, but he's giggling away. Bloody hell.
And my sergeant mate came in and he's like, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "Mate, this is hilarious." Like, he goes, "How's this hilarious? This isn't very funny," because and he's on the radio like, "Tell them to cease fire. Tell them to cease fire." And guys are laying out, like literally laying out in the open, like luckily in the dark. They just saw shapes and started shooting, right? And so, I was giggling and he's like, what is so funny? I said, "Mate, to go through all that yesterday and like all the boys, what we all went through, I said to now get lit up, by our own, like 100 meters from the front gate." So you got to laugh at that kind of thing.
That's irony.
Yeah. So, mate, that's kind of, that's that day. A couple of months later, I received the Victoria Cross for that. That wasn't the end of it. Like we finished out that mission, that tour. We went on to do some great stuff. Like what the troop achieved on that trip was, for that period of time and what we were doing was, everyone likes to talk it up.
Yep.
But, we did some really good stuff. And I just think it's worthwhile acknowledging what the troop achieved and the squadron achieved as a whole on that trip. But also, whilst I was lucky's not the word, but I was, I received the award that I did. I also like to say, like, that's the same day that I potentially didn't come home to my family, like very, very close, right? That's the same day my mates, will never walk again properly because of the way they got wounded. They were affected. And one of the other guys was seriously affected by it. Not only the woundings, but the whole day itself.
Yeah.
That's the day that one of the Americans never went home to his family.
Yeah.
They lost their son, their brother, their uncle. and vice versa, right? There's a whole bunch of Afghans over there that never went home that day either.
Yeah.
And so, whilst we do think about the Victoria Cross and what a moment, that deserved, I guess, recognition as was not my choice, but as it was awarded. I always just like to remind people of that. It's not always. Yeah. There's always a flip side to it. Yeah, it's not always an amazing thing.
No, mate, it's
awesome, man. Love hearing this version of it, because the other reaction that I did to his when he was, I think, interviewed on television, and the things are a bit grainy. The quality here is a lot better. Obviously, Mark's a little bit older now, but still keeps himself in good nick by the looks of things. Speaks and articulates the events of that day really, really well, as you would imagine. And I love the humility of Mark and the recognition of the other side of that coin, the other aspect to it. It's the day he almost didn't go home to his family. It's the day that his mates or his mate, struggle to ever be able to walk properly again. Some of the mental scarring, or people that have been affected badly by the American who never got to go home to his family that day. And then on the flip side, like you said, I'm glad that he mentioned that as well. The other side of that, the enemy that you're sent over there to hunt, to look for, to kill or to capture, whatever the case may be, they're feeling the same type of loss on their side, losing loved ones, family members, etc. So war's a terrible thing, not easy for anybody to go through. Huge respect for Mark and his team for what they did. And I love how he's mentioned as well, they achieved some good stuff. They're not gonna go around and lay out all the specifics of all the great things that they have done, and all the other SF units as well that have deployed, that have done some incredible things. It's awesome to, without knowing all the details, it's just awesome to hear somebody like Mark just acknowledge that, touch on that for a moment at least anyway, as brief as it may be. And although that will glaze over the ears and eyes of people, that the majority of people that watch this, more than likely, the understanding that there is some recognition for those that were involved in this, and that they did achieve some really good stuff. Even though the public may never see it that way, even though those that review war, and if you have a look at war, nothing good ever come from, the common perception is nothing good has ever come from war. There's probably some truth to that, but there's also likely is some good that has come from war in that as well, without delving into that in this video. So yeah, we'll wrap this one up here. There's still a little under an hour worth of this podcast to go, so I will come back to this one and do some reactions to that, but I'm glad that we're able to get a bit of a reaction out of sounds like the vast majority of the event, which led to Mark Donaldson being awarded the Victoria Cross. So thanks for sticking around once again. If you're enjoying the reactions, or if you've got any comments or suggestions, like I said, I won't be offended if anybody says you talk and waffle too much. Feel free to whack that in there and I'll try to do better. But anyway, whatever challenges or struggles you may be going through, no matter how difficult they may be, I encourage you, keep turning up, keep smashing, stay in the fight. You're never out of it. And until the next video.